So I get a lot of questions about why Christianity is correct. If I want to become a believer in Jesus, there's all these problems that people already have in their minds. I took the time to put together these three big questions that people are constantly asking me in my real life. If you stay watching the entire video, you're going to see a full PowerPoint presentation that I put together addressing these three topics. So, real quick, the first one that we're going to start off with is possibly the biggest one for people who are not Christians themselves, or maybe you have family that's Christian, and this is like a very big thing amongst a lot of people that look at Christianity. They think it's a little too exclusionary. So that's this first question. What if someone is a good person but not Christian? Do they go to hell? That's the first question, will be the first one we address when we get into the PowerPoint, into the presentation. The second question is, do Catholics worship Mary? This is a big one because you can be a Christian and not be a Catholic. The Catholic is the biggest denomination on the planet. And no, they're the Pope and the Vatican is one of the biggest things on the planet, but everyone's looking from the outside in, not understanding this topic. Lots of people. For the third question is there supposed to be 40,000 denominations? The denominations are a relatively new thing for Christianity, but it's a reality that we all experience that can push away someone who's not a Christian yet. And if you are a Christian today, it can be extremely confusing. These three topics and more are covered in the lecture that is going to follow this intro. If you stay till the end of the video, you will become an expert on these topics, and now you can go into your life and teach others.
So first thing that comes into my head when I hear this is like this uncontacted tribe example, right? And there's clearly a big difference between someone who has heard about Jesus Christ and is just like, slothful in their approach and says, yeah, I could learn more, but I don't want to, versus somebody who lives in a jungle in the Amazon and has literally never heard the name Jesus Christ. This is not a new argument. People have been debating this since, the apostles. If we understand that Christ told us that no one gets to the Father except through me, you know, where are the exceptions, and when is it time to really lean on that teaching and say, no, this is not an exception? I think everyone wants to make themselves the exception, but a true exception would be someone who's not even in the discussion because they're like an uncontacted tribe. It's like I think that's a really interesting one. Another one that is extremely tricky is the most righteous of other religions. So when I first became as serious I am with Christianity, there was a part of me that was like, look, like you got to go to church exactly the way I go to church. You got to pray exactly the way I'm doing it, or it's over for you. Like salvation is at risk. That was my understanding. But there's some different experiences I've had this past weekend, and I hear my teachers that I learned from online. There's like a list of them that that I turn to when I have certain questions, and they say even amongst Catholics or even amongst Christians, you cannot say whether someone is definitely going to heaven or someone is not. It's never for us to decide. All the church fathers or saints or these people that have been through this before say you need to be worried about your salvation. And that's easier said than done. That's something that's said so simply, but it's like, it comes in the form of before you try to remove the speck from your brother's eye, look at the beam in yours. It's like these things that are so well known that we forget to focus on them, and we think we need something more complex. But that's something I'm learning with as I grow. And Paul's letter to the Romans is like a big piece of this. When I was doing my research while preparing the slide, it was something that kept coming up. It's like Paul directly, as he's speaking to the Romans, is talking about that. One of the reasons we need to spread the gospel so much is so that they can get salvation. And I'm always quoted saying that your main job as a Christian is to be concerned for the salvation of others. And I always say it's almost like a litmus test. When I meet somebody who says they believe in Jesus, if they're not trying to convert other people that they know, I personally will question, like, perhaps you're not taking it as seriously, and then come to find out I've never really seen that be an incorrect metric. I think that people who really understand and have contemplated the afterlife, contemplated things like divine retribution, where you pay for things twice. Something's going to happen to you in this life. You'll do something in this life. You'll pay for it, obviously, earthly, and then there's a second payment that comes when you stand before Christ, who's the judge of all souls. But this slide specifically, guys, I do want to hear you guys jump in on these points because I know how I feel about them. But last slideshow, I was really just hitting you guys with the doctrine over and over and over again. With Orthodox believe this, the Catholics believe this, but I'd really like someone to jump in and what is the first things that come to your mind, and then I think I can best explain from there.
Okay, I'll go. So when you talked about not judging other people in Paul's letter to Romans saying, or whichever point was made that we don't know or we can't ever judge who's going to heaven, who's not. That's something I personally struggle with because it's so easy when you like are making sacrifices or trying really hard to live a certain way and giving up things you may really enjoy doing or yeah, just giving things up and then sacrificing and trying to live a good life, and you see other people not doing that. It's so easy to be like, "Well, you." Oh, sorry, I don't know if I could curse on the recording, but just like to feel bad feelings towards other people, and I wouldn't say that I almost like want them to be punished eternally, but yeah, it definitely sucks if it's like I'm doing this so I don't get punished. Why is that person over there? They better get punished. It's almost a feeling. I will admit it.
Right.
Like that's not like a good thing, but I would definitely judge other people. Like, yo, that's gonna happen to them. So that one's something that I struggle with personally.
Yes, I think what you're saying is something that I relate to too. And when I completed this entire slideshow presentation that you're all about to go through, I already was jotting notes for the next one, right? There's only so much we can cover in little 90-minute chunks, especially when you guys do jump in this way and share what you think. But, the Catholic question, is Catholicism correct amongst others? The more you look into it, you realize, wow, there are actually a lot of differences between Catholics and other Christians. And I think I've seen Catholics try to answer this with purgatory, right? Purgatory. Most of the time, on these calls, me and Nadale get a laugh because it really can be Orthodox and Catholics versus what every other Christian thinks. But this is something, I want to dedicate most, if not all, of the next presentation that we do at some point this week when I check your guys' availability and we can schedule it to discuss purgatory specifically, because purgatory deals with this question of different levels of purity amongst those that are saved, right? Like to Michelangelo's point, where it's like, if I'm sacrificing all this and someone, believes in Jesus Christ but has done none of those sacrifices, how can we, rationalize that to the all righteous God? If the God is righteous and he sees everything and we get justice from him, I don't think that he would let these iniquities pass where, people are dedicating to themselves. And like he said, I don't want anyone to go to hell. He would never say that because you haven't done what I've done. But, the Catholics kind of answer it where, souls in order to reach heaven, souls in order to return to the Father must be purified. And the Catholics, really argue strongly for purgatory. But even someone as close of a denomination as the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, does not include purgatory, and Protestants definitely do not. So, just from judging from your first response, Michelangelo, this, is really helping me realize that we need to talk about purgatory, and I think it would be really informative to everyone because it's one of those things in Christianity. Like, people have heard of maybe Dante's Divine Comedy where he talks about purgatory and hell and heaven, but I don't know, they're not talking about it enough at Mass. And this is what I'm learning is the thesis for this group is like, you could go to Mass every single Sunday for the rest of your life. There's some stuff that can't be touched on during the celebration. There's a set rhythm to it, and I appreciate that rhythm and that ritual, but we have questions. And if you're anything like me, which if you're this far into the call and this far into this community, you are probably a lot like me. You have a mind that desires to understand. And I think that purgatory is definitely a worthy topic of discussion. One thing I want to say, just to completely flip what my brother Michelangelo just said, is when I heard that none of us can decide or none of us can know who gets into heaven and who gets into hell, there's no way a human could know that about another. To me, it was almost like a feeling of relief because I was driving myself crazy in that comparison, right? Doing that comparison, saying everything that I know, I don't see anyone like even looking into what I know. And it wasn't, so I think that could be, maybe something that could be welcome to you to hear is that, maybe you could look at us not being able to know whether others are saved or not as a relief. That's not even something that for us to contemplate. We need to focus on our own salvation and understand that, greater hands have that. And to me, that was great relief for me, because I was when I first realized that, oh my God, I'm going to have to answer for everything that I've done in this life. I'll immediately you think of other people. It's like the first thing that happens. But trust me, worrying about your own salvation, it is enough. It's enough there where you can be fully occupied with. So, yeah, those are the points that I really want to cover. And Daniel Nadale, I know,
Quick.
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, Nick wants to go
Can
on.
you hear me, Valentino?
I can, yes.
What's going on, brother?
How are you, man?
This topic, I feel like we could just talk about this for literally hours and hours.
Right,
and hours.
right.
I mean, what it all boils down to is just exactly what we've just been talking about. Everyone's salvation is individual to them, and it's your own relationship to God, because everyone lives in such completely different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we could talk about a million different circumstances and a million different examples. One that just randomly pops into my mind is like, I don't know, someone who may not explore the faith in terms of like actually maybe reading the Bible as much as someone else, but maybe they're out going to feed the homeless or doing things like that, things along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like what Mike said too. You can't really look at someone else and be like, oh, they're not doing this, this, and this, because A, you don't know what they're doing behind closed doors, because maybe they're doing that, and that, and you don't do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And B, it's like, again, who are you to judge? Only God can judge.
Right.
You know, so we can't really judge others based on the merit of what they're doing, because our perspectives and our lives are all so different that it's like, maybe that person didn't do this, this, and this the way you did because their life went A, Z to D instead of A, B, F to E. You know, so all of our life circumstances are so different. Therefore, we just do things different ways. And obviously, the whole concept of it needs to be the same. Obviously, you need to be striving to get better. You need to be striving to do good. You know, you need to make the difficult decision or the good decision rather than the bad, which is typically the easy decision. So again, we could go
it's a big topic. It's a big topic. It's a big topic.
You know, and like, I know just us two have gotten into it, especially about other religions, where it's like, if you were born into another religion and you were literally just never exposed to Christianity, never exposed to Catholicism, it's like, sometimes I kind of have, what's the right word?
Empathy?
Yeah, empathy, or I feel, not really empathy, I feel bad for them.
Pity?
You know,
Pity?
Not even pity. I more so just feel bad for them. It's sometimes people are born in these circumstances where here is your set of beliefs. This is what we believe. This is what you have to believe. You know, you never really explore much more. And yeah, you can make the argument that that's the bad decision, that's the wrong decision. But I don't know. I think life is very sporadic and it's very individual. It definitely boils down to the individual and their experiences. But I think we can definitely agree on the fact that if you're striving to do better, you're striving to do good, you're striving to do the right thing and live Christ-like per se, I wouldn't say you're necessarily going to heaven. I think we can agree on that one too. But it's just an interesting thing to think about. It's an interesting thing to talk about.
Right. Yeah. Dude, I want to riff off of so much of what you said. Like, there's so many things you were saying where I was like, oh, I have to mention that. So first thing I want to say is, you know, everything you're saying is true, and that's if we have perfect knowledge of the other person's life. And we definitely know we don't even have that. So even, let's say you had perfect knowledge to know everything that happened to a person's life, then you could still come to that conclusion that, you know, perhaps they're on a different journey. We don't even have a shred of complete knowledge of another person's life or internal world to even make that judgment. So it's like, it's definitely true with what you're saying. And that, to me, is like this overcoming of the self. Right? This so much of what I'm learning about when I try to look at the world and assess the world, it almost has nothing to do with the world. It happens with me, like letting go of this idea that Valentino knows all. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that everyone should be able to relate to that. Like, that's what I think the growth comes to. People say all the time that there's quotes from the saints I see on Twitter. You know, it's like, you know, there's like this letting go of your will for God's will. But it's like, what does that mean? I think it applies to all levels. And you know, when pride is the first of the deadly sins, I'm starting to understand why, bro. Because it's like, as soon as I assert myself as an expert and then start to act from that lens, I fall immediately. And it's like, this humbling can even be to say, I don't understand this yet. Let me focus on myself before I try to condemn another. You know, and I think that that's really easy to say, but you know, I wish you guys could see the pictures in my head that pop up when I think that in my own life. You know. And another piece of it was especially this children idea and these other religions. Like I really connect to that. I even had an example when I was having these debates at this event I went to on Saturday. This at the end of the party, everyone was hearing my testimony. I kind of gave a huge testimony for Catholicism in the face of another individual who had studied theology in college and was the religious authority of that friend group. And I do all these, air quotes because the kid basically was a Christian, went to a Christian university, took a course that was called theology, graduated, and his conclusion he came to was that the Bible shouldn't be taken literally. And I can't underline that enough because it's like there's a group of people that are relying on that person. Like they were all smiling and pointing to him that he knows the most. And in my heart immediately sank. I was like, wow, like if we are all souls and there are a bunch of souls in this room, and those souls think they have found their champion that will not lead them astray. And I think everyone in this call can agree that that conclusion is false and misguided. As much as a person can say, oh, yep, I outsmarted the Bible. It's supposed to be a metaphor, guy. Like it comes from a position of pride to say, yeah, I'm smarter than every saint who's ever lived. The Bible's not literal, guys. Like trying to, yell that message. That doesn't only affect his salvation, it affects the salvation of the others in the room. So I was like I guess a light for other people. And there were other kids who came up to me that were like, dude, I'm a Catholic. I never heard anybody stick up for us like that. Oh, dude, I'm a Catholic. And there's two guys in the room that were Catholics. So all this is to say, at the end of that testimony where I was like getting very animated, there were people who pulled up chairs to listen. I was, doing my thing. One kid was like, yo, bro, like, I'm Hindu and the things you were saying make sense to me. And I was like, whoa, like, he's like, yeah, like, and I was like, okay, so you're Hindu, because he kept talking to me about, capital God, that, they believe in the creation story. They believe there's a purpose for human souls. I was like, okay, back up for a second. Let's pause for a moment. I was like, you as a Hindu, what does the Hindu teachers you have say about Jesus Christ? He goes, I don't know. And I was like, oh man, like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, you would think that somebody who is a polytheist, like a Hindu, where they have multiple gods for different things, right? He would at least understand what the position is on Jesus Christ. He doesn't even know the position. And this ties all back to what I was saying about what my priest said during confession in the last Live Call 005, where you guys have access to the recording. He looked at me, and after I gave him all my sins, and I told him everything I did, and I'm feeling pretty bad, he's like, you're bringing up this idea of mortal and venial. He's like, mortal sin is much more rare than you think. And I was like, why? He's like, most people are not free. They're not acting from a position of free knowledge, a full knowledge, or we're like basically in an automatic state. A lot of us are just reacting. A lot of us are like little robots. There's not so someone that you would think is on the far end of the spectrum, for him to say he's a Hindu, like conclusively say this is who I am, like as part of his identity, you would think he would have a position on Jesus Christ. And his position was, I don't know what the Hindus say about Jesus Christ. So like everything started, I was like, wow, you know what I'm saying? It's like that was a big moment for me, especially after a huge debate defending Catholicism. So that like is to touch on what Nick just said, the most righteous of other religions. There's a point in St. Paul's letter to the Romans where he talks about, if someone doesn't know about Jesus Christ, they will be judged. If they don't know about the law, it says they will be judged according to the law that is written on their hearts. Now that's obviously a very, particular way of saying that, but I think there's a lot of things we can extrapolate from that. But I think that this particular topic, mercy on those without the gospel, is not anything that we're going to be able to get to the bottom of today. Like Nick said, we could talk about this for days, but I do want to continue to open it up for the other members that haven't spoken yet, just share your thoughts on this, because this is what being a Christian is all about. It's like you're confronted daily with the complexity of the idea of salvation. Every single day you realize that, whoa, this Jesus dying for me thing is way more complex than they let me believe. It's like there's a lot happening here. And I just see so many people fall in a debate format. If someone challenges them, you're going to want to be able to defend your beliefs, because I think if you're presented with a situation where you're in a position where you had to say, I don't know, that's a crack. And, you may down the line 3-4 years later stop going to church. You never know from that butterfly effect. And we don't want to let these people who can come through and say, hey, the Bible shouldn't be taken literally. It's a good book, good book. A lot of good teachings in the book, good book. But it shouldn't be taken literally. Like, it's like we need to be prepared. But this is something that Daniel said that reminded me. Daniel said this, if not last call, then the call before. It's like it's paradoxical sometimes. I think he gave some example of a shadow when he was saying it, but it's like it is. It's like there's a lot of times. One of the burdens of belief is having to carry the opposites sometimes, and because this is like a meta piece of Christianity, and it's something you will never, there will never be a moment where you're no longer confronted with this idea, whether that comes from someone who's, challenging your perspective, or just looking into the world and thinking about it yourself. But I think anything that we could talk about in this call that puts stress on the individual's journey and says, hey, let me actually focus on what I need to do, was of great benefit to me. So if you guys can feel that way too, that's amazing. Yeah, man, I agree with a lot of the things you said too, man. I think on the last call, I made a great job on live call 005 of making sure, speaking up for church doctrine and saying, look, it's not fun to not know what to do. And that's what I kind of told the theology major kid. I was like, how do you handle your personal belief? He's like, I take it day by day. I'm like, I know what that's like. So you don't even need, you can smile, smirk in this conversation. But I'm like, I was there before I accepted Christ. And it's not fun. It's actually the worst thing ever to have to deal with so much crushing uncertainty every day. So what I want to make a message out there to of any Christian is I am a Catholic, and the Catholics definitely have a set position on things. And I think that especially as a young person, right, this youth in this call, that's the best thing you can have for you can still assert your own opinions on what is said as church talk, and I advise you to do that. Read through them and say, okay, I agree with that, but at least you got some framework, bro. Because to me, there's nothing scarier than just trying to just take it through forgive my language, but just raw dog life. To me, it's crazy that people are trying to do that. And I know how I felt when I was trying to do that. It's like, if you look at the history like a stream of human lives, there's always this passing down of knowledge. Very rarely does someone have no influence from anyone. And that's of their best interest. It's your best interest for your parents to tell you what they figured out so they can save you the pain. So if you look at church doctrine as that if there's 2,000 years since Christ's time walking the earth, we can pass down that baton of knowledge down, and you don't have to go at it alone. And I think that might be unique to Catholicism. And Orthodoxy as well has a very rich church history as well. But, I met a lot of non-denominational people this last week. And the non-denominational perspective is we're finding it out. So I think that leaves a follower stranded sometimes, because the no rules can be, someone can bloom in that environment, I guess, right? There's somebody who's really attracted to this, there's no rules, it's just a relationship to God. But I know for me, I can't be that rare to have found solace in the rules, to say, whoa, there's a right and wrong way to live. That to me brought the clarity I think I needed. I was always suspicious of that. When someone would tell me life is not black and white but shades of gray, it was almost like I couldn't quite grapple with that. Other people like that, but to me it was there's no way. Life, I do as a person still believe in absolute right and absolute wrong. And just keep that in your back pocket. When you talk to people, ask them if they believe that. You'd be surprised at the answers they give. This is what I think is missing a lot of times. It's we've said it once before on this call, but it's this is the level 2 stuff, maybe even the level 3 stuff, because I wish more people were aware of this, that is Jesus true is the beginning, bro, the beginning. And it obviously we have a task, it's been said many times this call, to share with others. But I just want to real quick, I think this is a great time for me to jump in and express the gratitude of what everyone brings to this call, where we are trying to get to the bottom of it, and the journey aspect cannot be stressed enough. And so I think regardless of someone's denomination, I think it becomes abundantly clear that this is a lifelong thing.
Right.
And
100%.
It was Sam Shamoun himself who said that the atheists' God, they say that they're without God, right? They say atheist, right? I don't have God in my life. Their God is their intellect. They worship the intellect. They're thinking that, that they, with a small mind that they have, a human experience, especially it's probably limited, chances are they're not the oldest person on the planet, right? So they have a limited experience on Earth, that they figured out things that disproves God. So you have to put your mind to the side and say that there are things going on that I will never understand, right? We can do our best to solve the questions that are plaguing us the most. But there is this, I'm called back to that quote again, which is the submission of your will for God's will. And I was an Orthodox priest whose book I was reading where he says that, a lot of other denominations don't stress the mystery aspect. And that's something I do respect Orthodox, in that nature, that they say that this is mysterious. Like, this is a mystery. It's like we can participate in the mystery and we can do our best to explain the mystery to others, but it is something that must be experienced for the self. And
the holy mysteries, you gotta just experience it, and you better be lucky enough that you get to experience it.
Put your brain to the side for a moment. Put the intellect to the side for a moment, and allow the intuitive part of the self that comes from God, the intuitive part of the self that has the more direct line to God, right? Our minds do our best, but it's like there's like this intuitive piece of it that you just have to feel, and even Bishop Marmari has done so much for me in my learning. It's a big part of my conversion process, right? To realize Christ is the truth. He says, just because you don't feel him, you think he's not there. That's where you want to have the faith. Put your objections to the side for a moment and believe, and we walk by faith. It's like, so it's a lot, man. Sometimes the most simple Bible quote can just be unpacked like indefinitely, like forever. It's like, and I think that that's a source of great beauty, and it makes me want to talk about not this next point, but the last point. I think is really big on this, where it's like there's so much happening that I think there's no such thing as focusing on this stuff too much. I think, right? It's like we want to absorb ourselves in God completely. So let's look at the next one here. Okay, intercession versus worship. So this was like a huge piece of the debate that I had with the theology kid. And it was surprised me that even someone who like that, right, who has gone to school for this kind of thing, he himself didn't really understand the difference between intercession and worship. Because he once he admitted to me that, okay, I don't believe the Bible should be taken literally. I don't really consider myself a Christian anymore. When his Christian background was Baptist, and he was saying that one of the things that he didn't like about Catholics is that there's this worship of Mary and the saints. I was like, okay, bro, we got to get into that. And I broke it down for him in such a way that I'm going to try to replicate here. But this is a big, big deal, man. People have one view of Orthodox. Well, you said to yourself, like they talk about it, idolatry, and how the Orthodox and the Catholics are, have all these idols. They're not even clear about it. It's almost like an echo chamber, right? Someone that they trust said that, so then they repeat it without even a filter. We got to get clear on this definition. This is something I will always ask. When someone brings up that topic of why do Catholics and the Orthodox pray to Mary? Why do they pray to, the saints? Do you know what intercession means? Yes or no? Before I go any further, that's what I'm going to tell them, because it's a big topic.
Forget about intercession. Do you even know where the word prayer even comes from? Prayer or worship, two different things.
Yeah, for real. Yes, exactly. Yeah, even the worship part, I'm going to get into that. Exactly. That's so much of debate is like, we always assume that the person has the complete knowledge that we have and the complete knowledge that on both sides, and there's one thing you don't disagree. But there's a slew of things where you guys have different interpretation of that word, different interpretation of that word. That person may not be clear on that term. Dude, I'm so glad you said that, and that's really where we're going. It's like, it was so, because the kid was smart. That's another thing. Like, it wasn't like this kid was dumb. And that's why I think we attracted a small crowd. Like I was telling my brother, like 2 kids were literally pulled up chairs, but at any given point throughout the discussion, there would be somewhere between 2 and 5 people listening, because I'm a very animated speaker. I'm over here like this, waving my arms and stuff. It's like the way I talk. And then he was already established as the smartest kid on religion in the room. You see what I'm saying? So it was definitely like a battle royale in ways, and he wasn't clear on intercession versus worship. So this, I have the definition here. So intercession is the action of intervening on behalf of another. Okay, that is the Oxford Dictionary definition for the action of intervening on behalf of another. Okay, then the Oxford Dictionary definition of worship in the noun form is the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration for a deity, and deity is underlined specifically. So it means it can only happen for a God figure of some kind. So that's why it's so funny that if a Catholic or an Orthodox won't say Mary is God, why would worship even be in the question? Worship is exclusively for deities, and where no one is saying that saints are deities. No one is saying that Mary is a deity. You see, it's like it's very interesting, and that's why that's something my older brother taught me. It's like you got to get clear on the terms. You can save yourself 2 hours of arguing if everyone can get clear on the terms immediately. And then, stuff makes more sense. And then the verb format of worship is show reverence and adoration for a deity, honor with religious rites. Okay, so I have some points here. Okay, so, it's right here. So this is what I want to show. So intercession versus worship. I was in the debate. I'm sharing you guys a little bit about when you're in debate, you got to get clear on those terms, okay? Basically, someone who is not a Catholic or not an Orthodox has no idea how saints work. That is my summation at this stage of my life. I'm not the oldest guy, but it's like thus far I've never seen that not be the case. They have basically nothing but misunderstandings about saints unless they identify as a Catholic and an Orthodox. It's not like when I was a little younger, I thought that the Protestant people had heard about saints and they didn't like it. They don't know anything about it. Do you see? It's like their judgments are almost made from complete ignorance. They have no idea how it works, but then somehow are against it. And that can be seen in the political sphere. We talked about that a little bit on this call or other calls, where it's like in the political space, you got people arguing for shit they don't even understand how it works. They just are told to argue for it. So that's something I wanted to address. The Blessed Virgin Mary is the biggest one, bro. It's the biggest one. And to me, it's so confusing because it's like, this is not a saint is someone you've never heard of. Everyone knows Mary. This is, you know what I'm saying? She's not even buried in obscurity like a Padre Pio is. Like a Padre Pio, if you're not a Catholic, it's going to be hard for you to recognize that guy, right? But for the Virgin Mary, it's like everybody knows her. Those people, the Protestant people who, the Bible is so sacred to them. It's all in there. I saw this one. I didn't include it in this, but it's like every piece of the Hail Mary prayer that I'm about to get to comes from direct Bible quotes. It's just put together to create a singular prayer, and that's what I want to get into here. When I'm in the talk, can you guys see me, or you're just seeing the PowerPoint?
I can see you and the
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Okay, so when I'm standing next to this individual, and there's a couple other people around us, and we're in the kitchen, right? This is where this debate was taking place, and they have a pantry door, and I put my hand out like this, and I said the prayer. I was like, "Do you know the prayer?" After he had, said some things about how Catholics worship Mary, I was like, "Let me tell you the prayer," and I went like this, line by line with it, and I think if you can understand what the prayer says, it's clearly not worship. It's clearly asking for prayers. So it's Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So I'm telling him, dude, you have all these opinions on how Catholics worship Mary. You think it's wrong. You think it's bad that we make statues of her. I was like, do you know the prayer? He goes, no. I was like, okay, that's significant. And I was like, if you knew the prayer, okay, you would see that we're asking her to pray for us. No, we're in here. We mentioned Jesus in the prayer, clearly she is special because she's the mother of God. And it's not that if the prayer itself says pray for us, I said, let me break it down even further for you, bro. Because then his thing was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, but why don't you just go right to the source? Why don't you just pray to God the Father? Skip over everybody, go right to God the Father. I'm like, dude, okay, let me break it down for you this way. When you're sick, right? If anything like some kind of Christian, when you're sick or someone you know is sick, the first thing they say is, hey, someone in my family's not doing well. We would ask that you would pray for us, right? Oh, I'm really not feeling well. If you could send some prayers our way, we'd really appreciate it. There, you're not going right to God. There, it's intuitive that another person praying for you would intensify the prayer. It's intuitive. No one needs to be told that. I've never seen someone who said, hey, will you pray for us? Whoa, don't worship me. Whoa, don't worship me. And I'm saying, hey, can you pray for that? Don't worship me. See what I'm saying? It's so intuitive when the person's in front of you. So what I told them is at that moment, you're not interested in saying, go straight to the Father. Oh, of course, go straight to the Father. No one has a gun to your head and saying, I need to ask for intercession of Mary, or intercession of a saint. But it's nice when you're in a place of extreme struggle to ask for that extra boost, right? A Protestant of any denomination would agree that if they were going through something difficult and they found out that people have been praying for them, they'd be like, oh my, thank you. Thank you. That makes me feel like, I'm in way better hands. That is a natural, intuitive response. And I watched the recognition on the individual's face change, where I was like, dude, that's what we're doing with Mary. On grand scale. It's like Catholics and Orthodox around the world are doing this, but this is a particular Catholic prayer. That's what's happening. And then my heart went out to him. I was like, wow, even this kid who has studied theology, done all these things, he is still suffering from what he does not know. It's almost an inescapable piece of humanity where it's you will always suffer for what you do not know. So now this person is like, maybe turned away from Orthodoxy or Catholicism the rest of his life because he thinks we're worshiping Mary. But I was like, bro, did you ever think to look at the prayer? Let's get the prayer out and say. So it was so funny to me that I went to the pantry door and was going line by line, and then like extra highlighted, much in the way that it's bolded on your screen now. Pray for us, and I think that this is bigger than a prayer to the Virgin Mary, right? It's like, dude, this is everything with religion. I was having a conversation, with another person outside of the debate. It was a different day, a different situation, but we were just kind of talking about like every gripe I've had with Christianity when I was a youth. You guys know my story. There was a time I was almost anti-Christian, not in the faith at all. Probably closer to an agnostic atheist or, whatever title we want to give ourselves, but godless, for all intents and purposes. Every gripe I had has been addressed. Every single gripe. It's not when someone can't bring themselves to worship Christ or bring themselves to the truth as we understand it, it's just because they don't understand some things. That's it. If they were actually given, like my brother talks about his conversion process so much, he was like, yeah, I was on the call with Valentino and he just addressed every single point I had. You see what I'm saying? Then you're like left with nothing, but you convert. Like there's this, the Shroud of Turin is like, it's trending extremely right now. A lot of people know about it, talk about it. The dude who like was trying to disprove it started studying the Shroud and then converted to Christianity. It's like, it's like the proof is overwhelming. And I would, with pretty good confidence say that every single person who is opposed to Christ, opposed to Christ's godhood, just doesn't know enough. That's I know that's a bold claim, but I think that's the truth. No one, basically, I had other Catholics in my life when I was looking at other religions, and it wasn't enough. It's really it's a personal understanding about it, and it makes sense for exactly what I need. And when I went into the Protestant church, I think it was Friday, I in that singular moment, I was like, whoa, they were non-denomination, right? So which is even more rare amongst even Protestants, right? There are a lot of Protestants that don't like non-denomination, so it's a lot. But in that singular moment, I was like, there's nothing wrong with these people, right? I may disagree with the teachings, I may disagree with the way they do it, but at the end of the day, they're loving people who are trying to do their best. And that I want to share on this call, this way it's recorded, is that was a life-changing experience for me to say like, whoa, like, it's like you can get almost so caught up in this, like, I tell you, if I'm not careful, I'll turn every time I talk into that, my Catholic view versus everybody else. Like, and it doesn't have to be that way. I'm always going to say I believe Catholicism to be true because it's, it's done so much for me, and it's like almost a confirmation bias where everything that happens makes me even more sure. I've yet to be in a position where I'm like, I'm on the ropes. Since my return, I feel very strongly about it. But yeah, I think that the only biblical significance I can see that points that almost like prophesied that this denomination thing would happen is if you look at the letters of St. Paul. He immediately was saying that this church I established here is disagreeing with this church. Immediately. And it's like, because humans are there. You see, it's like, it's going to be, of course, Christ is not asking for denominations. The only thing that I can look at in the Bible, to my current understanding, that says, denominations are almost inevitable is because humans are there. It's like one church is completely separated from another church. Like, I mean, we're on a call right now with Zoom. It's pretty miraculous. But at the time, that was literally not there. So St. Paul gives one talk at one church. Boom, they get going. He goes to the next, starts another church in another city. And now those churches have different ideas about how to do it. And he tries to calm it down. He says, you should not hate the other person for doing it differently. He's like, that's not what I taught you, to hate another church. So I think that there's that. But yeah, I would probably say that denominations is inevitable as long as we continue to allow humans to decide for themselves, right? That's like what I notice is like humans are going to feel differently. That's the beautiful thing about this call, and I think it's going to happen because we're human. Just like that's the corruption argument to a T. People will say, "Oh, there's corruption in the church." Yeah, bro, because there's humans in there. It's going to happen. So now what I'm looking at, I've just gotten this new lens today, really. Just is really striking me as so profound is like there's going to be denominations and disagreements because humans are there. It's almost human nature for people to have different interpretations of this, and then those people are charismatic speakers and attract followers. It's like it's going to happen, like it's inevitable. until we can maybe get into a theocratic society. Maybe that's in the cards coming. I don't know. We'll see about that. That I think is maybe perhaps the only exception would be if it's mandated that you have to worship a particular way. But I think I had something else here, guys. Oh yeah, so this prayer I think did so much, and then that's another thing I want to say is like a lot of Protestants vary against the veneration of Mary, but they don't know the prayer. They don't even know the prayer. So to me, it would be like that's a hard criticism to make when you don't even know how we're doing it. You know, and I got pieces of that in Adele's explanation of when he went to the icon, kissed it, honored it, and then asked for it to pray for him. You know, the saint to pray for him, like that. I think there's a lot of people who if they heard that would change their minds, and I think the same thing is true of the Hail Mary prayer. If they were to see what's happening here, it's hard to look. It talks about that blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. So she is so special because she gave us God on earth. And at no point does it say, you alone are the Lord, Mary. You alone are the most holy, Mary. Like, that's never happens.
Yeah, you would know if it's worship or not. That's like, you would honestly know if it's worship.
Yeah.
What they were doing to the calf and Baal, they were worshiping the
Exactly,
calf
yes.
like they were going, like the calf was going to feed them. We're not asking the saints to feed us.
Yeah.
We're asking the saints to say, hey, man, I've been struggling. Ask God, please, just pray for me. That's it.
Yeah. That's huge, man. The calf, I think that's a huge example. And it says so much. It's only worship if it implies what you're praying to is a deity. Yep. And deifying is it, they're deifying that statue. They're deifying that calf, this animal symbol.